Welcome back to GISC 1336. Over the past 3 weeks, we've moved from understanding the drafter's role in survey profession to working with surfaces and grading to appreciating how terrain is represented, modeled, and reshaped. Today, we'll take another significant step. We turn our attention to one of the most important products a surveyor will ever produce, a plat. Now, the word plat is familiar to anyone who has bought or sold land, opened a title commitment, or sat in a planning commission meeting. But in the world of survey engineering, the plat is more than a drawing. It is a legal instrument. In Texas, plats are filed with county clerks and municipal authorities. They establish property boundaries, guide development approvals, and enter the permanent record. That means a plat sits at the intersection of surveying, law, and public trust. It is simultaneously a technical product, a legal document, and a public record. A contour line may be wrong and only frustrate a grading contractor. A plat line may be wrong and lead to litigation, invalidated deeds, and lost property. Because of this, plat preparation is subject to strict professional standards outlined by the Texas Board of Professional Engineers and Land Surveyors, or TBPELS, and their rules, and the 2004 TSPS Manual of Practice. The Surveyor of Record, the RPLS, carries the responsibility of certification, but the drafter plays a vital role in ensuring accuracy, clarity, and compliance. In today's lecture, we'll explore what a plat is conceptually and legally, the purposes plats serve in the state of Texas, statutory and professional requirements for plats, different types of plats and their uses, a drafter's role in plat preparation, ethical and legal considerations unique to plats, plat design principles and template features, and best practices for consistency and quality. Along the way, I'll be drawing connections to the Fundamentals of Surveying exam, or the FS exam. For example, FS questions will test your understanding of land descriptions, subdivision design, and boundary law. This exam expects you to know not only how to compute a traverse closure, but also the legal hierarchy of evidence and boundary disputes. A plat, in practice, is where those worlds converge. And by the end of this lecture, you should understand both the Texas-specific requirements of platting and the universal surveying principles that plats embody. If we accept a plat as both a technical drawing and a legal instrument, then we must ask, why do plats exist? What functions do they serve in practice, in law, and in society? This may seem like straightforward questions, but as with many things in surveying, the deeper we look, the more layered our answers become. The plat has always been more than a drawing. It's a way of organizing land, of making sense of ownership, boundaries, and rights in a form that can be communicated, enforced, and passed down through generations. In Texas, plats are indispensable because they accomplish several critical purposes. They give legal certainty to property rights. They ensure compliance with statutory and regulatory frameworks. They're guides to orderly development of land. They communicate boundaries to audiences beyond the surveying profession, and they protect the public interest at large. Each of these purposes deserves careful exploration because together they explain why platting is one of the most important responsibilities of a surveyor. And perhaps the most fundamental purpose of a plat is to provide clarity and permanence in matters of property ownership. In Texas, as elsewhere, land is conveyed by deeds, but the words of a deed are not always sufficient to visualize the property described. Consider a deed written in the language of metes and bounds, beginning at a point on the east line of the old San Antonio Road, thence south 245 varas, thence east 310 varas, without a surveyed plat. Such a description is little more than just an abstraction. The plat translates those words into lines on paper, drawn to scale, tied to monuments, and presented in a form that can be checked against the ground. In doing so, it gives the deed life. It ensures that property rights are not only expressed in text, but also fixed in a visual record that anyone, from a county clerk to a district judge, could reference. Once recorded, a plat becomes part of the permanent fabric of property law. It is consulted in court cases, relied upon in real estate transactions, and examined across boundary disputes. The FS exam is going to emphasize these points across this section on boundary law and property principles. Test questions will often deal with the hierarchy of evidence, natural monuments, artificial monuments, record bearings and distances, and so on. The plat plays a central role in that hierarchy because it preserves survey evidence in an official, accessible form in dispute between neighbors. The plat can be the difference between resolution and prolonged litigation. For that reason, accuracy in platting is not simply a matter of technical pride, it's a matter of literal justice. Another major purpose of our plats is to ensure that land divisions comply with the law. Texas, like every state, has statutes governing subdivision. Under the Texas Local Government Code, no land may be divided for sale, development, or construction unless a plat has been approved by the appropriate authority, usually a municipal planning commission or a county commissioner's court. The requirement is not mere bureaucracy. It's a safeguard to ensure that new lots have adequate access, utilities, and drainage. Without such regulation, land could easily be split haphazardly, creating parcels that lack legal access to a public road, that fall below minimum lot sizes for septic systems, or that sit squarely in a floodplain with no mitigation efforts in sight. Each of these situations can cause immense problems for the landowner, for the neighbors, and for us, the public at large. The plat is a mechanism by which government ensures orderly development, or at least that's the ideal. When a subdivision plat is submitted for approval, public officials can confirm that streets are properly aligned, that easements for utilities are included, and that drainage plans comply with floodplain ordinances. Once the plat is approved and recorded, those dedications, streets, right-of-ways, utility corridors, all become binding on all future owners. Here we see the intersection of surveying and governance. The surveyor and the drafter are providing the technical expertise, the public authority is providing oversight. Together, they're ensuring that the growth of communities is a rational, safe, and sustainable form. Our FS exam and its land development component is going to mirror this reality by testing candidates not just on measurement, but on subdivision principles, easements, and regulatory frameworks. Beyond compliance, plats serve as blueprints for development. If you have ever walked through a new subdivision in Texas with its generally gridded streets, lots of uniform width, and dedicated utility corridors, you're walking through the physical realization of a plat. The subdivision plat is not just an artifact for filing. It is the document that tells contractors where to build streets, where utilities must run, and where drainage must be routed, and where houses may or may not be constructed. In effect, the plat becomes the DNA of a neighborhood. Its lines, once approved, translate into curbs, sidewalks, hydrants, and fences. Decades later, long after the original surveyor is forgotten, that plat remains record, continuing to shape how the land is used and transferred. This developmental role distinguishes plats from other survey products. A topographic survey may help an engineer design a site, but once the project is complete, the topo may be discarded. A grading plan may guide earthwork for an entire season, but once the ground is leveled, the plan has served its purpose. A plat, by contrast, persists. Its relevance extends into the indefinite future because land ownership and subdivision are not temporary matters. Our FS exam is going to reinforce this by requiring familiarity with subdivision design and platting as part of surveyors' professional competence. It's not enough to understand angles and distances. A surveyor must also understand how land division affects land use. One of the most overlooked but essential purposes of our plats is the communication factor. Surveyors are trained to think in terms of bearings, distances, and coordinates. Engineers may think in terms of alignments, profiles, and cross sections. But our general public, that's all of us right now, homeowners, real estate agents, city council members, your neighbors, they do not speak those languages fluently. They need these drawings that communicate ownership and boundaries in a form that is immediately legible. The plat fulfills this need by adhering to conventions: a bold boundary line, clearly labeled lot numbers, bearings and distances along each segment, curve data in neat tables, a north arrow and scale prominently displayed. For a surveyor, these are routine drafting choices. For a non surveyor, they are the difference between confusion and clarity. This communicative purpose is so important that Texas regulations spell out formatting requirements, fonts, symbols, line weights, to ensure consistency across departmental plats. That way, whether someone is reading a plat in Harris County or in rural county courthouses, they encounter a familiar, standardized format. The ethical dimension here cannot be overstated. The FS exam includes questions on professional responsibility, and one of the key principles is that surveyors must safeguard the interests of the public. Clarity in plats is a matter of public protection. If the public cannot understand a plat, the potential for misunderstanding, dispute, and fraud increase. Finally, plats exist to serve the public and welfare. In Texas, subdivision without platting is prohibited precisely because unregulated land division can harm the public. Imagine if developers could create lots without dedicating streets. Entire neighborhoods might be cut off from emergency services. Or suppose land could be sold without regard for drainage. Flood-prone lots could proliferate, creating dangers for residents and costs for taxpayers. The plat is the safeguard against such outcomes. By requiring plats to show access, easement, drainage corridors, and compliance with zoning, the state or local jurisdiction ensures that private land transactions do not compromise public safety. In this sense, every plat is a balancing act between private rights and public responsibilities. Surveyors acting through their plats protect the public in several ways. They ensure that no lot is landlocked, that utilities can reach every property, and that right of ways for roads and drainages are preserved. They also prevent disputes by tying every boundary to a surveyed framework so that future owners and courthouses can have an authoritative reference. Our FS exam again repeats emphasis on ethics and public welfare. It's not an abstract ideal. It reflects that the reality that surveyors, by preparing plats, directly influence the safety, accessibility, and equity of communities. The public's trust in surveyors rests in part on this very responsibility. When we step back, it becomes clear that these purposes are not isolated. Legal certainty, regulatory compliance, development planning, communication, and public protection are all intertwined. A plat that fails in accuracy also fails in communication because the public will inevitably be misled. A plan that fails to show easements fails in both compliance and public protection. A plat that is sloppily drafted, even if legally correct, may create confusion and disputes years down the line. This interconnectedness is why Texas places such emphasis on platting standards, and it's why surveyors must treat plat preparation with such seriousness. The plat is not just one more drawing in a CAD file set. It is a cornerstone of property law and development in the state. So, to return to our question, what is a plat for? It's for anchoring property rights in certainty. It's for ensuring land divisions follow the law. It's for guiding the orderly growth of towns and cities. And it's for making boundaries intelligible to both judges and homeowners. And above all, it's for protecting the public interest. If surfaces and grading, as we discussed in Lecture 3, are about representing and reshaping the land, then plats are about documenting and preserving the framework within that land is owned, used, and transferred. They are the skeleton on which the flesh of development is hung. And that is why in Texas and beyond, platting remains one of the surveyor's most solemn duties. Understanding what a plat is and why it matters leads us naturally to the question, what must a plat include in Texas? Here, we transition from conceptual goals to concrete standards, rules that transform a drawing into a legal instrument with enduring public trust. In Texas, the authority to create plats stems from two primary sources. First is our local government code. The legislature sets the foundational requirements for platting subdivisions of land. Under Chapter 232, landowners outside of municipal limits must prepare a plat when dividing tracts into two or more parts, forming subdivisions, lots, streets, alleys, parks, or other parts intended for public dedication. The law defines a subdivision broadly, applying whether the division occurs through deeds, contracts for deeds, or other methods. There are exceptions. Agricultural tracts, family divisions, and tracts larger than 10 acres, or transfers to veterans under specific state programs may be exempt. Secondly, there's our professional bodies, through the TBPLS rules and the corresponding TSPS manual of practice. While the local government code imposes what must be platted, the professional bodies define how the work must be done. The TSPS Manual of Practice for 2024, although voluntary, is widely adopted in practice and incorporated into board rules. It sets the standard for formatting, monumentation, accuracy, and the ideas of ethical drafting. TBPLS rules codify these standards, giving them legal effect, placing obligations on surveyors to produce plats that meet rigid technicality and professional qualities. Under Texas law and professional standards, a compliant plat must include legal descriptions, which are shown by meets and bounds tying the subdivision back to the parent tracts in original surveys. Our boundary depictions, with bearings, distances, curve data, and ties to original survey corners or state plane coordinates for precision. Our monumentation statement and placement, confirming that iron rods, pipes, or other durable markers are set as boundaries, lot corners, road intersections, and curves. Our title block information, including subdivision names, sheet numbering, surveyor, developer, owner information, dates that are relevant, scales, north arrows, and vicinity maps. We have lot and block designations, areas of each lot, total acreage, number of lots, and reserve or easement areas. Surrounding features, showing adjacent roads, easements, subdivisions, watercourses, pipelines, and recording information. And then drainage and utility information, including drainage, easements, setbacks, and floodplain boundaries drawn in accordance with county-specific requirements. Certifications and dedications. These are featuring statements of ownership, dedication of streets and easements, and professional certification by a Texas RPLS via this stamp. And then subdivision format. Typically an original Mylar or equivalent with waterproof ink, plus required digital formats, CADs, PDFs, shapefiles, for workflow and archival purposes. So from law to drawing to record, let's trace this process. First, we have a statutory mandate. If a land division meets the criteria, Texas law compels a plat. Second, we have professional standards. When preparing the plat, the drafter and surveyor must follow TSPS and TBPLS rules to ensure accuracy, clarity, and enforceability. Third, we have review and approval. County or municipal authorities review the plat, checking monumentation, dedications, formatting, and technical compliance. Fourth, Commissioner's Court or Planning Commission approval. Once approved, the plat is signed and then formally recorded by the county clerk. And then lastly, fifth, we have public record. The plat becomes a public document, enforceable and referenced in property transactions, improvements, and boundary determinations. So let's connect these to our FS exam. The requirements map closely to our FS exam domains. We have boundary law and real estate principles, where candidates must understand how plats establish legal boundaries, types of plats, and their authority in disputes. Second, we have surveying processes and methods in land development. The surveyor must grasp how plats relate to design, subdivision, municipal approval, and recorded dedicatory functions. And then third, professional ethics and business practices. The prepared responsibility, certification language, and public protection duties all echo exam themes. So while state law and TSPS provide overarching standards, counties and municipalities often augment them. For example, in Grimes County, there's a requirement for groundwater certifications, utility provider approval, traffic impact analyses, and title certification as part of the plat submission package. These local add-ons underscore the importance of understanding jurisdictional nuance. Getting plat requirements wrong isn't a minor draft error, it's a legal hazard. A plat missing proper documentation or certification may be rejected, could ignite neighbor disputes, and it can diminish future land values. For you as future drafters and surveyors, understanding these requirements means ensuring your work supports valid, defensible land records. It's professional diligence in service of public trust. Now that we've outlined the requirements that apply to all plats in Texas, the next question becomes, what kind of plat are we dealing with? Not every plat serves the same purpose. Some are meant to record subdivisions, others to adjust existing boundaries, others to dedicate easements, and still others to correct errors or omissions in prior records. Understanding these types is more than memorization. Each type of plat reflects a different legal context, a different client need, and a different set of professional responsibilities. Misidentifying the type of plat can lead to miscommunication with approving authorities, rejections of filings, and even invalidation of records. The most common category, especially in growing Texas counties, is the subdivision plat. This is the document that lays out a tract of land into individual lots, blocks, and streets. It is the basis for neighborhood development, commercial parks, and rural ranchette divisions. Subdivisions plats in Texas generally fall into two subcategories. Preliminary plats, which show the overall amounts of lots, their layouts, street drainage, and easements. These are reviewed by planning commissions or commissioners' courts to check conformity with subdivision regulations. And then there are final plats, which refine the details, show monumentation, and carry the certifications required for recording. In practice, the preliminary plats guide planning and negotiation with public officials, while the final plats become the recorded enforceable documents. For the drafter, this means paying close attention to details that shift between the two stages. On your FS exam, this relates to subdivision design questions, which test your understanding of lot layout, rights-of-way, and easement dedication. A preliminary plat is where those theoretical skills come into play, while a final plat is where your precision as a surveyor and drafter matter most. A replat occurs when an existing subdivision plat needs to be altered, perhaps to merge two lots, adjust a boundary, or carve a larger tract into smaller parcels. In Texas, the local government code requires notice and sometimes public hearings for replats, especially if they reduce lot sizes or change access patterns. The intent is to protect neighboring property owners and the public from surprise changes that affect drainage, traffic, or land use. For drafters, replats demand extra care because they must tie back to the original plat, clearly show both the existing configuration and the proposed changes, and include legal statements clarifying the revision. Errors in replatting can lead to confusion in deed records, overlapping claims, or challenges to approval. And sometimes a plat doesn't need a wholesale reconfiguration, but only minor correction. Perhaps a misspelled name, an omitted easement note, or a shift in a lot line between adjacent owners. In Texas, such changes are handled through an amending plat. The advantage of amending plats is that they can only bypass full public hearings, or is that they can often bypass full public hearings, streamlining the correction of minor issues. But the drafter's responsibility is significant. The amendment must be carefully limited in scope and clearly annotated to avoid creating ambiguity. From an FS exam perspective, this touches on professional ethics. Surveyors are expected to correct errors transparently, not obscure them. The amending plat is the legal mechanism by which we admit and fix mistakes, safeguarding the record without undermining trust. And many Texas jurisdictions recognize short form plats, sometimes called minor plats. These apply when only a small number of lots are created, often 4 or fewer, and when no new streets or public dedications are required. The purpose of this category is efficiency, to avoid burdening a small-scale landowner with the same review process required for large subdivisions. For the drafter, minor plats still demand full compliance with drafting standards, but the approval process can be quicker, sometimes handled administratively by staff rather than elected boards. Another important type is the vacating plat, used to legally nullify a previously recorded plat, in whole or in part. This might happen if a development project fails, if the land is sold back into larger tracts, or if legal disputes necessitate reverting the property to an earlier condition. Vacating a plat is not a trivial matter. It requires approval from the same authority that approved the original plat, and it carries significant legal consequences. A vacated plat essentially erases the subdivision from the official record, meaning that lots may cease to exist as legal parcels. For future surveyors, this highlights the weight of your work. Plats are powerful instruments, and undoing them is rare, formal, and consequential. In addition to the main categories, Texas surveyors sometimes prepare specialty plats to dedicate easements, establish utility corridors, or define right-of-way acquisitions for highways. These plats may not divide land into lots, but they carry the same legal weight once recorded. Right-of-way plats, in particular, tie surveying directly to public infrastructure projects. They show the land to be acquired for roads, highways, or utilities, and they must withstand scrutiny in eminent domain proceedings. Accuracy here is paramount, because errors could undermine the legality of takings and lead to costly litigation. One of the recurring challenges for drafters is identifying the appropriate type of plat early in a project. Clients may not know whether they need a replat, an amending plat, or a new subdivision plat. Municipal staff may have specific preferences or interpretations of the code. It often falls to the surveyor's office, and by extension the drafter, to guide this process. This requires not just technical drafting ability, but also familiarity with Texas law and local regulations. Your FS exam will test knowledge in broad strokes, but in practice, it's the subtle distinctions that matter. A well-prepared drafter anticipates these distinctions, saving clients time, money, and frustration. And the diversity of plat types illustrates a broader truth. Land ownership is not static. Properties are divided, merged, corrected, abandoned, or repurposed in response to human needs. The surveyor, through the plat, gives these changes form and legality. Whether you are laying out an entire subdivision, merging two lots, or dedicating a right of way, the plat you prepare becomes part of Texas's legal and physical landscape. That responsibility requires both precision and judgment. At this point in the lecture, we've defined what a plat is, explored its purposes, and examined the legal requirements that govern its preparation in Texas. But now we need to address a more practical, professional question. What role does the drafter actually play in bringing a plat to life? Again, this is not a trivial matter. Plats are not drafted by committees, nor are they generated automatically by software. They are the result of careful translation, from the field notes of the survey crew through the computations of the surveyor, into the clear, standardized graphical representations that can withstand scrutiny in a courthouse 50 years from now. The translation is the drafter's responsibility. And while the ultimate legal authority to sign and seal a plat rests solely with a licensed, registered professional land surveyor, the drafter's fingerprints are all over the process. It's the drafter's work that determines whether the plat communicates clearly, whether it complies with professional standards, and whether it earns approval from public authorities. In many ways, the drafter is the unsung architect of the plat's reliability. And the first responsibility of the drafter is to serve as a bridge between field data and public record. Survey crews collect raw observations, bearings, distances, coordinates, elevations, and monument descriptions. The surveyor interprets these observations, resolves conflicts, and establishes boundary lines. But it is the drafter who must turn that information into a visual document that communicates not just to surveyors, but to judges, landowners, developers, municipal staff. This requires both technical precision and artistic clarity. A boundary bearing that is miskeyed in a deed may be clarified in the surveyor's analysis, but if the drafter types it incorrectly into the CAD file, the error is reintroduced into the record. Likewise, a curve that is mathematically correct but poorly labeled may confuse a planning commission or mislead a future title examiner. Thus, the drafter's role is not mechanical. It is interpretive and communicative, grounded in accuracy, but aimed at readability. One of the drafter's foremost duties is accuracy. Every bearing, distance, curve data point, acreage calculation, and monument description must be transcribed faithfully from the surveyor's notes and checked for consistency. In practice, this means verifying that closure computations are correct and that the plat reflects a closed figure for each lot and tract. Double-checking curve data against field calculations to ensure that the arc length, chord, and radius agree. Confirming that areas labeled in acres match the computed areas with acceptable tolerances. Ensuring that all monuments set or found in the field are depicted with the correct symbology and labeled with descriptive notes. Texas counties are rigorous in review of plats, and one of the first things they look for is mathematical integrity. A plat that a plat that fails too close to property or that misreports curve data will not pass. The responsibility for getting these details correct lies with the drafter as much as it does with the surveyor. Your future FS exam will reflect this reality by including questions on traverse closure, coordinate geometry, and error propagation. For the student preparing to enter the professional practice, mastering these computational skills will be essential because they form the foundation upon which accurate plat drafting rests. And then beyond accuracy, the drafter is also responsible for standards compliance. In Texas, plats must conform to the requirements outlined by TBPLS and the detailed manual of practice. This includes not only substantive elements like bearings and easements, but also formatting conventions, line weights, fonts, symbols, north arrows, scales, and title blocks. Why is this so important? Because consistency builds trust. A plat that follows expected conventions is easier for reviewing authorities, attorneys, and landowners to understand. A plat that deviates, using odd symbols, inconsistent fonts, or missing standard elements, not only risks rejection, but also undermines the credibility of the surveyor's office. Here you'll see some overlap with your Lab 4 work. We have templates, styles, and XREFs, and they may seem like technical minutiae, but they are in fact tools of compliance. A well-designed template ensures that every plat begins with the correct title block, north arrow, scale bar, and layer standard. Shared styles guarantee that line weights and fonts match TBPLS expectations. XREFs allow large projects to maintain clarity and coordination across multiple sheets. Data management practices ensure that the final plat submitted matches the approved design without discrepancies or missing information. For the drafter, these practices are not optional. They are professional safeguards. A plat, again, is both a technical record and a public document. That means it must be clear and readable, not only to surveyors and engineers, but also to our non-technical public audiences. The drafter achieves this by carefully applying principles of graphic communication, hierarchies of information. Boundaries should be the boldest, most prominent lines, easily distinguishable from easements, topography, or other minor features. Legibility. Text must be sized so that bearings, distances, and lot labels can be read and printed at scale. Overlapping annotations or excessively dense callouts defeat these purposes. And then there's balance. The plat must be arranged so that critical features are not crammed into the margins or overshadowed by excessive notes. Clarity is not just an aesthetic. It has legal consequences. A plat that cannot be read easily may create ambiguities that lawyers exploit in court. In land disputes, ambiguous plats are liabilities. For that reason, clarity is as much a professional responsibility as it is accuracy. Another central role of the drafter is to work in close collaboration with the RPLS. The surveyor is responsible for legal interpretation, resolving boundary conflicts, applying hierarchies of evidence, determining bases of bearing, and drafting the certification statement. But the drafter translates those determinations into graphic form. This collaborative relationship requires communication and trust. Drafters must be willing to ask questions when notes are unclear, when deed descriptions conflict, or when computed closures don't match. Likewise, surveyors must provide drafters with clear instructions, not just drop a pile of field notes on their desk. In many offices, the relationship is iterative. The drafter prepares an initial draft. The surveyor reviews and redlines. The drafter revises. And the cycle continues until the plat meets both technical and legal standards. Understanding this process is crucial for students preparing to enter the workforce. And while the drafter plays a central role in plat preparation, it's equally important to understand where their authority ends. Only a licensed RPLS may sign and seal a plat. Altering a plat after it has been sealed is prohibited and constitutes a violation of TBPLS rules. This boundary exists because platting is a legal act. The drafter contributes to the preparation, but the surveyor bears ultimate responsibility. That division of responsibility protects the public by ensuring that only those with the proper education, experience, and licensure can certify land boundaries. For students, this should not be discouraging. On the contrary, it should be empowering. As drafters, you are trusted with vital parts of the process, but you are also shielded from ultimate liability. Your role is to provide excellence in drafting, knowing that your work directly supports the professional seal of the surveyor that one day may be you. And then, one of the most valuable contributions a drafter can make is in quality control. Reviewing plats for consistency, completeness, and compliance before submission saves time, protects reputations, and prevents costly rejections. A good drafter checks not only geometry, but also the little things. Is this legend complete? Are the easements labeled with their purpose? Are certification statements using the exact wording required by the board? Is the surveyor's seal block correctly formatted and sized? County reviewers often return plats for trivial reasons: missing curve tables, incorrect scale bar, a title block that omits the sheet number. These errors may seem small, but they delay approvals and frustrate clients. The drafter who masters quality control of their product becomes invaluable because they prevent such setbacks. In many offices, drafters are also educators. They create and maintain templates, update style libraries, train new employees, and ensure that drafting practices remain consistent across projects. By doing so, they institutionalize best practices, making the entire firm more efficient and professional. Drafters also serve as communicators with outside stakeholders. While a surveyor may attend public hearings or client meetings, the drafter's work speaks for itself every time a plat is submitted. A clean, compliant plat communicates professionalism, competence, and reliability. A sloppy plat communicates the exact opposite. So, I know we've made a lot of connections to the FS exam, so where does this all go? Well, when you double check closer computations, you are applying survey math and error analysis, which will be tested on your exam. When you prepare curve data tables, you are using geometry of curves, which again is tested on the exam. And when you ensure the plat shows easements and right-of-ways, you're applying boundary and property law principles, tested on the exam. And when you follow board standards, you're practicing professional ethics, which will be heavily emphasized on your exam. So the FS exam is not only about computation, it's about professional judgment. And plat preparation is where these judgments become visible. So, what is the drafter's role in plat preparation? It is to translate raw data into permanent record, to ensure accuracy, compliance, clarity, and quality, to collaborate with surveyors with respecting ethical boundaries, and to serve as the custodian of standards and the communicator of property information to the public. Plats may bear the seal of the surveyor, but they carry the craft of the drafter. Your careful choices in line weights, labels, and layouts will determine whether the plat functions as the clear, defensible legal record it's intended to be. In that sense, the drafter's role is not secondary, but central. Without drafters, plats would not exist in their usable form. With skilled drafters, plats become what they are meant to be: accurate, compliant, legible, and trustworthy instruments of property law. This is the part of the course where the why behind our drafting choices comes into sharp focus. Plats aren't just drawings. In Texas, they're legal instruments that affect title, infrastructure obligations, and the public's reliance on the record. Today, we'll put our boots down into Texas law and TBPLS rules, and I'll connect each concept back to what you actually do on a sheet, whether it's line works, notes, signatures, seals, down to the way you manage your files. So, in Texas, land surveying is regulated by statute and by the Texas Board of Professional Engineers and Land Surveyors. Two statutes anchor everything we do. First is the Texas Occupation Code, Chapter 1071, the Professional Land Surveying Practices Act. It defines who may practice with the scope of professional surveying, licensing pathways, and responsibilities like sealing official acts. And second, there's the Texas Local Government Code, chapters 212 and 232. The platting framework for cities is 212 and counties is 232. And this is including approval timelines, replat requirements, and enforcement. And TBPELS implements detailed rules in the Texas Administrative Code, Title 22, Part 6. For surveyors, look especially at Chapter 138, Compliance and Professionalism for Surveyors, and Chapters 131, Definitions, including direct supervision and responsible charge. The board publishes a consolidated Acts and Rules PDF that I'll bookmark to our Canvas page. So, let's talk a little bit about our seal, our signature, and responsible charge. Once you seal it, you own it. And TBPELS rules lay out both how to seal and what sealing means. So, seal specs and use. Your seal format and legibility requirements are in Section 138, Tag 3.1. Pre-printing blank forms with the seal or using decals is strictly prohibited. Electronic seals and signatures are permitted, but you must protect them and notify TBPLS within 30 days if they're lost or compromised. And we have sealing procedures. Only seal work you did or that was performed under your direct supervision. Direct supervision is synonymous with responsible charge. If you incorporate others' works, clearly label what you did versus what you relied on. State land surveyors must use their state seal on GLO submittals, whether it's field notes, plats, or reports. And then there's misconduct. It's a rule violation to sign or seal work that endangers public welfare, to seal while your registration is inactive, or to let others use your seal. Using a fraudulent seal is also clearly prohibited. And then we have direct supervision and responsible charge. The board defines this as having control over decisions and detailed knowledge of the work you supervise through presence or reliable communication, such that you can answer for research, monument placement, and deliverables. Think of that similarly as what we're doing in this course. I'm giving you direct supervision or responsible charge as you work on your plats. I'm providing the education and the training through our practicums, and then you're set off with tasks. I test your knowledge via our exams and later on our final projects. And it's going to help further prepare you in future courses to conduct drafting work on your own accord. Another practical translation for this section is don't rubber stamp. In CAD terms, if sheets include work originating outside of your control, e.g. from a developer-provided base map, engineer alignments, your notes must make those dependencies explicit before you sign and seal. And the board's ethics subchapter is short, powerful, and highly tested on the FS exam. First, there's public protection. This is the prime directive. Surveyors shall protect the health, safety, property, and welfare of the public. If an error could mislead an agency or the public, it is your responsibility to correct it. Be objective and truthful. Your assertions, oral or written, must not be fraudulent, deceitful, or misleading. Disclose material facts and limitations. If a boundary could float due to conflicting calls, mark it. Conflicts of interest must be disclosed and managed appropriately. And then we have competence. Only practice in areas where you're competent and current. Escalate when a matter crosses into engineering or legal advice. Collaborate and delineate roles on the sheet. You'll notice if any of you ever get to pursue your licensed state land surveyor exam that you're going to be required to have experience in different regions of Texas. Whether that's West Texas, whether it's Pine Country or the Coastal Bend, that is going to be your areas of competence. Make sure you understand that You're not expected to know all of the state of Texas today, but at the pinnacle of your career, at that licensed state land surveyor level, that's when you will. And then confidentiality. Maintain client confidentiality consistent with law and public protection duties. There are some amazing surveys that you may get to be a part of that are going to be interesting and challenging, and you may be interested in talking about them. But that doesn't necessarily give you the right to. Your client's projects are your client's projects. You are simply the one helping them uncover certain aspects of their project so that they can make more informed decisions. In the likelihood that certain surveys are intended specifically to go into court, speaking about them out of turn is going to be a breach of that confidentiality. So again, make sure to know when and where you can talk about what you've done. And then Texas courts have given us a classic hierarchy of calls and other boundary doctrines that quietly govern your drafting choices and your narrative notes. So the hierarchy of calls was first established by the Texas Supreme Court in Stafford v. King in 1867. It cemented this order: natural objects control, then artificial monuments, then course and distance, because monuments reflect where the original surveyor actually went. Later cases and federal decisions applying Texas law echo this. And then the hierarchy of calls is also known as the priority of calls, just in case you ever hear them said either way. And again, follow the footsteps of the original surveyor. Our goal as future surveyors is to retrace the original lines as they actually run and corners that were actually set, not to perfect the geometry. The long acquiescence and credible field evidence absolutely can outweigh perfect math. And then when calls conflict, monuments typically control, but not if a monument call was a mistake. In those cases, courses and distance may prevail. Texas courts have said this explicitly. It's another reason why surveying is handled in civil courts. It comes down to reviews of evidence and then final decisions, either by peers or judges. And then we have to think of senior versus junior rights, or parent versus child rights. You can't use a junior survey to shift a senior survey's boundary, but junior recitals may help locate lost senior lines. Kirby Lumber versus Lindsay in 1970 is our touchstone for this example. And what this means for our plats. Our basis of bearing and notes should tell reviewers exactly what you relied on: record versus found monumentation, or evidence reconciliation. And it needs to be consistent within the board's reporting standards. And the board's professional and technical standards require you to show the relationship between record monuments and the boundaries within our report, on the drawing and or in a separate narrative. With record references, monumentation requirements are codified in subchapter E as well. If you're drafting a subdivision plat, your legend and notes should connect dots between found and set monuments, record calls, and any reconciliations that were made. Under the Local Government Code, Chapter 212, the approving authority must approve with conditions or disapprove of a plat within 30 days of filing. Failure to act equals approval. The statutory shot clock, which was strengthened by House Bill 3167 in 2019, also applies to plans and limits, and it limits the types of action the city can take. Extensions are tightly controlled. As a drafter, supporting the RPLS means that your submittal package and sheet notes should anticipate fast, formal action and clean conditions language. Counties operate under the Local Government Code, Chapter 232, with parallel requirements to Chapter 212 and some different exceptions. If you're working outside of city limits or in an extraterritorial jurisdiction, check which chapter governs and mirrors its exact terminology on your title block and owner certificates. Quick practice tip. Conditional approval is effectively a disapproval until conditions are met. Agencies must issue written statements explaining each condition or reason for disapproval. Your cover letter and plat notes should make it easy for the reviewer to map each condition to a specific fix. Then, the Texas Supreme Court's Town of Flower Mound v. Stafford Estates in 2004 applies the takings of jurisprudence to municipal exactions tied to plat approvals. Or in plain English, its required off-site improvements must have a nexus and rough proportionality to the project's impacts. As a survey professional, you're not giving legal advice, but your plat's dedication statements and improvement notes should be precise about what is and isn't being dedicated or constructed, so that the records may align with any proportionality analysis. Board policies set the line between engineering and surveying. An Attorney General request in 2021 specifically flagged concerns about engineers practicing surveying near the Texas-Mexico border, reinforcing the Chapter 1071 control surveying practice. If your project involves engineered features, road profiles, and such, coordinate roles and make sure each professional seals only their portion. Where both types of work appear, each seal should clearly attribute responsibility. Use the engineer counterpart rules, section 137.33, for their sealing procedures, for coordination expectations. So on right of entry and access when you get to things like locked gates. When access is denied, Texas law allows an RPLS to seek a court order to cross land to perform their official duties. The statute lays out venue and standards for the order. Do not trespass. Escalate properly and document your efforts. Your field notes should reflect access limitations in any court authorization obtained. And then this week, our lab is going to emphasize templates, styles, and XREFs, as well as data management. And this isn't just neat CAD. These are practices that are ethically important. They're going to put a focus on truthfulness and traceability. If you reference external base maps or prior plats as XREFs, your general notes should identify those references with recording data, dates, and any known limitations, aligning with Section 138 TAC 91's requirements to delineate relationships between record monuments and reported boundaries. And then again, there's the security of sealed work. If you transmit sealed PDFs using unalterable settings and protect your electronic signature in compliance with sections 138 TAC 33 and 138 TAC 35, don't give vendors or clients access to your seal files. That is misconduct on your part. And then we need firm identity. Plats released by a registrant must know the surveying firm's name and registration number when applicable. Confirm the firm is registered with the board before the title block is finalized. So let's go through a few common ethical pressure points and how you may want to respond. Take, for example, the question, can you just move that line to match what the title company wants? Your answer lives in the hierarchy of calls and the board's truthfulness rules. If the evidence says otherwise, explain in writing why the requested change would be misleading and offer a documented reconciliation or a boundary agreement path with counsel. If you're asked, we're short on time, just seal the preliminary sheet and we can fix it later. Sealing a document that could mislead or endanger is misconduct. If a client insists, stop and reclassify the sheet clearly as preliminary, not for recordation, and withhold your seal until it meets Section 138 TAC 33 standards for release. If you're told the city didn't act in time, the plat is automatically approved, right? Well, maybe. If the filing was complete and the statutory 30-day clock ran without action in the form that Section 212 TAC 009 requires. Don't advise legally. Instead, document the dates, request the statutory certification of failure to act from the authority, and coordinate with your counsel. Your job is to ensure that the record reflects facts, not trying to cheat the system. Beat the system. And then if you're asked, can the engineer just sign my boundary sheet to help speed things up? No, absolutely not. Each professional seals their scope of work. Cross-discipline reuse must be clearly attributed, and any alteration by a second license holder requires resealing of the altered work by that second professional. So, it's coming down to writing what you know on the face of the plat. Good plats read like honest narratives. In Texas, make sure your sheets and or your attached surveyor's report address these things. Your basis of bearings and datum. Include epoch if you're using GPS. Monumentation, found versus set. Materials, any witness corners, all aligning with the board subchapter E. And then record ties and reconciliation, anything between calls and evidence, as Section 138 TAC 91 requires. This is where you nod to Stafford v. King without turning the sheet into a law review article. And then dedications and easements, precisely worded so that they match the city and county code in any proportionality conditions. Again, think flower mound. And lastly, the firm and surveyor identification, including your registration number and the firm's registration number as applicable, and the correct seal and signature date on the block. And in the event that the laws and the facts don't line up, sometimes we have record descriptions and ground truth that refuse to agree. Texas courts expect reasonable certainty, not perfection, in reconstructing historic lines. Your responsibility is to document your method and evidence candidly, so an agency or court can follow your footsteps. Kirby Lumber, again, is instructive here. Quick cross-checks for Texas plats and ethics, as in our QA pass. Did I seal only what I did or supervised? And did I label incorporated works? Are conflict limitations and dependencies disclosed plainly? Is there a way this sheet could mislead a reviewer or the public? Does the document help a reader retrace the original surveyor's footsteps? Are timing statements and certification language aligned with 30-day shot clock reality? If you can answer these questions confidently and accurately, you've done a good job of passing your QA sets. In ethics in Texas, again, it isn't abstract. It's your day-to-day drafting, your notes. It's how you treat your external data and what you choose to seal. If you're faithful to the board rules, protect the public, be truthful, stay competent, seal correctly, and if your plats reflect Texas boundary laws and insistence on evidence over geometry, you will produce records that regulators can approve and future surveyors can rely on. And I know this section was a bit intense, so just for reference for y'all, some of the primary sources, things that you should really take away and remember here as your future resources, because again, you're not doing all of this work today, but you will be in your professional careers. So a lot of those sources that we talked about the TBPLS acts and rules. We talked about the Texas Administrative Code Title 22, and Part 6, with a focus on chapters 138 and 131. We went over the Texas Occupations Code, Chapter 1071, the Professional Land Surveying Practices Act, and the Texas Local Government Code, Chapter 212 and 232, which focused on platting framework for cities and counties, respectively. Keep these in mind as you continue throughout this program and on your journey to become future land surveyors. And I know we just spent a lot of this lecture emphasizing the legal and ethical framework that governs plat preparation in Texas, whether it was the statutes, board rules, case law, or professional obligations. But an equally important part is the craft of design. A plat may be legally correct, can contain the right bearings and curve data, and carry the proper seal. Yet it may still fail its purpose if it's unclear, illegible, or confusing to its audience. And that's where design principles come in. They are the bridge between technical accuracy and effective communication. They ensure that the plat not only meets legal standards, but also serves its broader role as a public record that judges, commissioners, landowners, and future surveyors can read without ambiguity. Why should we care about design when plats are legal instruments? That's because clarity is a matter of law as well as it is utility. Texas courts have long emphasized the importance of certainty in land descriptions. A deed or a plat that is ambiguous can fail as a conveyance. Board rules require surveyors present information in a manner that is clear, unambiguous, and consistent with professional standards. In other words, design is not a decoration. It is part of the legal sufficiency of the plat. A poorly designed plat risks misinterpretation, dispute, and outright rejection by reviewing authorities. A well-designed plat enhances trust, speeds along approval processes, and stands the test of time. The single most important principle in plat design is clarity. Every feature, label, line, and symbol must be instantly understandable at the scale of the drawing. Consider a subdivision plat filed in Harris County. If the lot lines are faint or indistinguishable from easement lines, a title examiner may misinterpret which area belongs to which lot. If a floodplain boundary is drawn with the same line weight as property boundaries, a planning commissioner may misunderstand the constraints. That's why Texas survey practice emphasizes clear differentiation. The TSPS Manual of Practice specifies conventions for line weights, symbology, and text heights to ensure that essential features, boundaries, easements, right-of-ways, stand out. The local government code doesn't specify fonts or line weights, but county and municipal ordinances often do, requiring plats to meet standards that prioritize clarity in their region. And clarity is also tested indirectly on the FS exam. In sections on map scales, contour interpretation, and cartographic principles, candidates are expected to understand how visual representation affects communication. In practice, the plat is where those principles are most consequential. The second principle is consistency. A plat must follow established conventions so that readers across Texas, or across decades, can interpret it reliably. Consistency means that symbols for monuments are uniform, that fonts are standardized, and that curve data tables follow the same order: radius, delta, arc length, chord bearing, and distance. It means that north arrows always point in the same direction relative to the sheet, and that scale bars follow accepted formats. This principle is not just about aesthetics. It ensures that plats are interpretable. A county clerk in Travis County should be able to read a plat from Bexar County without confusion. A surveyor in 2075 should be able to retrace a plat filed in 2025 without puzzling over unusual symbols. Consistency is why templates and styles, the focus of Lab 4, matter so much. By starting every plat with a standard template, you enforce consistency across projects. By sharing styles across teams, you ensure that line weights and fonts remain uniform. By using XREFs correctly, you keep multi-sheet plans consistent. These are not just tricks of CAD, they are the implementation of professional design principles. The third principle is the hierarchy of information. Not all elements of a plat are equally important, and the drafter must guide the reader's eye to the most critical elements first. In practice, this means that property boundaries are drawn with the heaviest lines. Lot numbers and block numbers are bold and prominent. Easements are lighter, often dashed, so they do not overwhelm boundaries. And topographic or supplemental features, if even included, are even lighter, subordinate to the legal framework. The hierarchy ensures that a reader sees the land division first, then the supporting details. Without this hierarchy, plats become cluttered, with no visual distinction between primary and secondary information. In the future, on your FS exam, you'll address these concepts under cartography and map communication. As candidates, you must understand how symbology and visual hierarchy affect interpretation. As a drafter, you must apply this theory every time you assign a line weight or arrange symbols. A plat is also a public-facing document. Once recorded, it's no longer that technical artifact, but a part of the permanent legal record. For that reason, it must project professional appearance. This means you need a complete, well-organized title block with the surveyor's name, firm registration, project information, and sheet numbers, north arrows and graphic scales placed consistently, clean lettering, free of overlapping or crooked text, balanced uses of white space, avoiding crowding in certain areas, and neatly drawn curve tables, legends, and certification statements. Professional appearance might sound subjective, but in practice it is codified. Counties often reject plats for illegibility or unclear presentation, and board rules hold surveyors accountable for presenting work in a manner consistent with professional dignity. In short, a plat should look like it belongs in a courthouse record, not simply an exercise that we did at the start of this course. And another key design principle is Texas compliance. While state law and board rules provide the foundation, counties and municipalities impose additional formatting requirements. For example, some counties may require plats to include FEMA flood panel numbers. Others require vicinity maps showing relation to major roads. And some mandate specific text for dedication statements. As a drafter, your design process must incorporate these requirements from the outset. This is where data management and templates become critical. A well-maintained plat template can include standard notes, dedication language, and certification blocks that align with board and local ordinances. That reduces errors and ensures compliance across our projects. And again, design is not just visual, it's textual as well. Notes and legends are essential to effective plat communication. General notes should explain the basis of bearings, the coordinate system and datum used, references to record plats, prior plats, or surveys, and explanations of symbology that would not otherwise be obvious. Legends should clearly identify symbols for monuments, easements, and topographic features. Abbreviations should be standardized and explained. The TSPS Manual of Practice provides accepted abbreviations, like IPF for iron pin found, and deviating from these should be avoided whenever possible. These elements may seem minor, but courts and title companies rely on them, and litigation, A judge may look to the notes to understand whether a plat relied on the record bearing or field monuments. Ambiguous notes can weaken our plat's evidentiary value. And we cannot separate design principles from ethics. As board rules emphasize, surveyors must be objective and truthful, and they must avoid misleading the public. Poor design can mislead just as surely as false data. A plat that buries easements under bold boundary lines or that omits curved data from the table is misleading, even if technically accurate. Design is therefore an ethical responsibility. By following clarity, consistency, hierarchy, and professional appearance, you fulfill your duty to protect the public and uphold the dignity of our profession. Let's connect this all to our FS exam one more time. It's worth highlighting how plat design principles will intersect with our exam. While the exam does not ask about Texas-specific rules, it does test cartography and map communication, the ideals of understanding scales, symbology, and clarity, boundary law principles, and ensuring that plats communicate unambiguous property limits, and our professional practice and ethics, ensuring survey products protect the public welfare. Plats embody all of these. Designing a clear professional plat is not only good practice, it's also part of the body of knowledge you'll need to demonstrate on the path to licensure. So plat design is the moment where law, measurement, and communication meet. It is the craft of turning technical data into permanent legal record that is clear, consistent, and professional. As a drafter, your choices in line weight, font, symbology, and layout are not trivial. They determine whether a plat fulfills its legal function, whether it earns public trust, and whether it stands as a reliable record for decades to come. In short, plat design is as much about ethics and law as it is about drafting. We've just finished discussing plat design principles: clarity, consistency, hierarchy, and professional appearance. So the next question for you as a drafter is, how do we make sure every plat we produce actually follows these principles? The answer lies in templates. In professional practice, a plat template is far more than a convenience. It is the infrastructure that ensures every sheet your firm produces complies with board standards, TSPS conventions, and county requirements, without reinventing the wheel for every project. Templates are how design principles are enforced in our daily work, how firms maintain consistency across projects, and how errors can be reduced. This section will walk through the essential features of a plat template, explain why they matter, and connect them to both the board obligations and our Lab 4 exercise. So first we have the title block. Every plat in Texas begins and ends with a title block. This is not just a piece of graphic design. It is a formal identity of the sheet. A well-designed template will have a standard title block that includes a subdivision or plat name, clearly labeled, consistent with the developer's intent and municipal requirements. The surveyor's name and registration, as required by the board, prominently displayed near the seal. The firm name and registration number, which is also required when the survey is performed under a firm license. Date of preparation and revision blocks, ensuring the record is traceable throughout its life cycle. Scale and sheet numbers for multi-sheet plats, and these help prevent confusion in our records. And lastly, the vicinity map inset, required in many counties to show the plat's location relative to major roads. The title block in your template must be locked down, not casually editable. If you're freelancing or working in a small office, it may be tempting to simply borrow a title block from another sheet, but this practice risks errors. A true template ensures every plat starts with a compliant, consistent block. Two other small features that carry an outsized importance are the north arrow and graphic scale. Board rules require clear orientation of plats, and counties often reject submittals without a properly placed north arrow. The arrow should always align with the chosen basis of bearing, and its location on the sheet should be standardized across projects for consistency. The graphic scale is equally critical. Textual scale notes are not sufficient because plats may be copied, scanned, or have their sizes changed. A graphic scale ensures the record remains usable even if the sheet is resized. Your plat template should include both of these features, pre-positioned with layers and style settings that prevent accidental deletion or misscaling. And this is where your Lab 4 practice really comes into focus. A proper plat template defines the layers and styles for every major feature. Boundary lines, bold, continuous, distinct. Lot lines, lighter than our boundaries but still clear. Easements, dashed or dotted per TSPS conventions. Center lines of road, long dashed lines with consistent annotation. Monuments, symbolized consistently, circle, cross, or a specific block. And then textiles, for bearings, distances, lot numbers, curve data, and notes. By embedding these layers and styles in the template, you prevent drafters from freelancing with ad hoc line work. The result is consistency across projects and compliance with board requirements for clarity. Texas plats must also include multiple certification statements, depending on the context of the project. Your template should provide placeholders for each. Some are the surveyor certification, which is the RPLS statement that the plat is accurate, prepared under supervision, and complies with Texas statutes. There's the owner's dedication statement, dedicating streets, easements, and rights-of-way. There's a notary acknowledgement, which is required for recording purposes. And then county or city approval statements with signature lines for commissioners, planning officials, or city staff. These statements are not optional. They are legally required for a plat to be recorded. And the TSPS Manual of Practice provides model language, and many counties mandate exact wording. A good template includes these blocks in standard positions, reducing the risks of omission. We also have curved boundaries commonplace in our Texas plats, especially when subdivisions that have cul-de-sacs and road alignments designed with arcs. The board requires full curve data, radius, central angle, arc length, chord bearing, and distance for each curved boundary segment. Your template should include a standard curve table formatted to list these elements consistently. Similarly, line tables may be required for long boundaries, and lot area tables may be required in certain jurisdictions. By embedding these table formats in your template, you ensure that your data is presented consistently, legibly, and in compliance with local ordinances. And then your legend is one of the most overlooked but vital template features. It provides a key to the symbols used, ensuring that non-surveyors can interpret our sheets. Your template legend should include any types of monument symbols, easement line symbols, right-of-way markers, floodplain boundaries, and any other symbology specific to your firm, jurisdiction, or your specific project. TSPS has standardized abbreviations that should be followed whenever possible. Using unconventional abbreviations can confuse reviewers and it weakens the plat's long-term usability. And then every plat in Texas must also include certain general notes, and a template should provide placeholders for these, including our bases of bearing, specifying record versus observed, and the datum used. Coordinate systems, whether it's Texas State Plane NAD 83 or another, with each epoch if GNSS was used. Our floodplain statement, referencing FEMA panels and dates. Utility notes disclaiming the responsibility for underground utilities unless located by a survey. And title references, deeds, prior plats, or GLO surveys formatting or forming the parent tract. These notes are not optional commentary. They're required to meet board standards for survey reporting. Embedding them in our template prevents omissions and ensures compliance. And beyond graphic features, a plat template should also enforce file structure and data management practices. Sheet organization ensures multiple sheets of a large subdivision plat are XREF'd consistently to a master file. External references clearly name and manage XREFs to avoid broken links when transmitting to counties. Layer naming conventions following firm or TSPS standards ensures predictable structure. And then plot settings pre-configured to output line weights correctly at standard scales. These practices may seem like CAD housekeeping, but they are in fact ethical responsibilities. And the board requires surveyors to protect the integrity of their records. Sloppy file management risks errors, missing features, or altered data in our final submittals. And Texas counties and cities often impose unique requirements. A good template should be adaptable while still providing a consistent core. For example, Harris County will always require floodplain lines and notes. Travis County will always require groundwater certification notes. And smaller counties may require adjacent landowner information if it falls within 200 feet. By creating template layers and note blocks that can be toggled on or off, firms can quickly adapt to local ordinances without reinventing the design each time. And finally, the template must be designed for legal durability. A record plat may be relied upon 50 years from now in a boundary dispute. That means text must be legible when copied or scanned. Symbols must be standardized and recognizable to future surveyors. And our notes must be explicit enough that context is not lost. This is why the board and TSPS emphasize professional appearance and consistency. A plat is not just for today's approval, it is for tomorrow's court case. And in many ways, the plat template is the silent guardian of professional standards. It ensures that every sheet, no matter who drafts it, carries the same clarity, compliance, and professionalism. It enforces our board rules without relying on memory, and it reduces our chances of error and upholds the dignity of the surveying profession in Texas. So while your Lab 4 work this week may feel a bit like CAD housekeeping, building templates, adjusting styles, and managing XREFs, but in reality, you're learning to encode professional standards into your drafting environment. When you step into practice, these skills will not just make you efficient, they will make your plats compliant, reliable, and respected as a public record. So far, we've talked about plat requirements, types, ethical and legal considerations, design principles, and template features. All of that sets the foundation. But in practice, what really makes or breaks a surveyor's reputation is not just whether their plat meets the minimum rules. It's whether they are consistently high quality. Consistency is the difference between a firm who plats guide smoothly through county review and one that constantly faces rejection and red lines. Quality is the difference between a plat that can withstand courtroom scrutiny and one that becomes the weak link in a boundary dispute. But consistency and quality come down to best practices. The repeatable standards and workflows that ensure every plat, regardless of who drafted it or what jurisdiction it is filed in, reflects the same level of excellence. So let's start with consistency. In Texas, survey firms may work across multiple counties, each with slightly different platting ordinances. One county may require floodplain boundaries, another may require utility provider certifications. Another may demand adjacent owner information. If a firm starts from scratch each time, drafters are reinventing the wheel, and inevitably mistakes will creep in. Consistency avoids this problem by providing a core set of standards that apply everywhere. And these may be adopted for local ordinances, but the foundation remains the same. Consistency also protects against human error. If every drafter in a firm uses the same layer standards, the same title block, the same curve table format, and the same certification language, then reviewers know what to expect. The likelihood of accidental omissions drops dramatically. And beyond efficiency, consistency builds trust. County reviewers begin to recognize a firm's plats. They know they will be legible, accurate, and compliant. Over time, this reputation becomes a competitive advantage. If consistency is about predictability, quality is about excellence. Quality ensures that plats are not only accepted by regulators, but also respected as permanent legal records. A plat that is sloppy in line work, careless in notation, or ambiguous in presentation may technically pass approval, but it will not stand the test of time. Texas courts have made clear that certain inland description is essential. Ambiguities can render a conveyance void or trigger litigation. A high-quality plat, by contrast, reduces ambiguity and increases confidence that the record reflects the truth on the ground. The board echoes this in its rules. Surveyors must produce work that is accurate, clear, and unambiguous. Quality, therefore, is not optional. It's part of our professional responsibility. So, what practices actually ensure consistency and quality? Let's walk through a few key ones. First is the establishment and enforcement of firm standards. Every firm should maintain a standards manual that governs how plats are drafted. And this manual should specify our layering name conventions, our line weights and symbology for boundaries, easements, and monuments, text styles and minimum font heights, title block requirements, standard notes and certification statements, and file naming and storage protocols. For drafters, this manual should be both a guide and a safeguard. By following it, you ensure your work matches the firm's reputation. And for surveyors, it ensures that every plat carrying their seal reflects the same level of professionalism. Second is to use templates and styles without exception. We covered templates in our last section, but the key best practice is this: never start from scratch. Every plat should begin from an approved template with preloaded layers, title blocks, notes, and styles. This practice reduces errors, speeds up drafting, and ensures compliance with the board standards and local ordinances. It also means that if a drafter leaves the firm or a project changes hands, the style remains the same. Third is the implementation of layer discipline. Layer mismanagement is one of the most common sources of plat errors. The best practice is to use only approved layers, name our layers consistently across projects, lock or freeze reference layers to prevent accidental changes, and separate existing versus proposed features clearly. Many firms will audit their CAD files before submission to ensure no rogue layers are included. This may seem like overkill, but counties often reject plats with messy or inconsistent layer structures. Fourth, we prioritize legibility in all conditions. Remember, plats are often copied, scanned, or reduced. Best practices is to design for worst-case reproduction. Use text sizes that remain legible at half-size reduction. Avoid relying solely on color. Plats are often reviewed or copied in black and white. And ensure line weights are distinct enough to show hierarchy, even after poor reproduction. In essence, if the plat can't be read after scanning, it will fail. Fifth, is to build redundancy into our notes. General notes should be clear, consistent, and complete. Best practice is to include all required elements: bases as a bearing, coordinate systems, floodplain statements, deed references, in every plat, even if the client or county doesn't specifically request them. Why? Because the plat may outlive the reviewer. 50 years from now, a court may rely on the notes to interpret boundaries. Redundancy is a form of perfection or protection. 6. Maintain version control. In the digital era, one of the greatest risks is data inconsistency. If multiple versions of a plat file exist, confusion can arise about which one was sealed and recorded. Best practice is to maintain a clear versioning system. Archive sealed versions in a read-only format, whether it's a PDF or a secure TIFF. Clearly label working versus final files, and use data management systems or XREFs to prevent duplication. This aligns directly with some of the Lab 4 practices: managing XREFs, keeping files organized, and setting up proper data workflows is not just a CAD efficiency exercise. It's part of ethical practice to protect the integrity of our records. 7. Conduct internal reviews before submission. No plat should ever be submitted to a county without internal review. Best practice is two-step process: a technical review, checking geometry, closure, curve data, and legal descriptions, and a presentation review, checking our line weights, fonts, notes, and overall legibility. Some firms will use checklists to ensure no element is overlooked, while others require a second drafter or surveyor to review every plat before sealing. Whatever the method, internal review is essential to maintaining quality. 8. Document your sources and dependencies. Every plat relies on sources: deeds, prior plats, field monuments, coordinate systems, random objects recorded in the field. Best practice is to document these clearly in our notes, our legends, and our metadata. And this not only satisfies our board requirements, but it also protects you as a surveyor if a dispute were to arise. If a future surveyor retraces your work, they should be able to follow your sources step by step through their retracement. 9. Train and cross-train our drafters. Consistency across a firm depends on people, not just templates. Best practice is to train new drafters thoroughly in firm standards, and to cross-train them across project types, whether it's subdivision plats, replats, or right-of-way plats. This ensures continuity even as staff turnover occurs. It also builds a culture of quality where everyone understands not just how to draft, but why our standards matter. And then lastly, 10. Learn from our reviewer feedback. The best firms treat county or municipal review not as a burden, but as a potential learning opportunity. If a plat is redlined, the firm adds that requirement to its standards manual or template. Over time, this iterative process will build stronger templates and fewer rejections. This mindset of continuous improvement is a hallmark of professional excellence. And at first glance, these best practices may sound just like office management, but viewed through the lens of the Texas law and board rules, they are ethical imperatives. Consistency protects the public by ensuring our plats are legible and unambiguous. Quality fulfills the surveyor's duty to produce work that is clear, truthful, and professional. Version control prevents fraudulent alteration or confusion over sealed records. An internal review reduces the chances of errors that could harm property rights. By following these practices, drafters are not only making their own jobs easier, they are upholding the ethical responsibility of the profession. And once again, let's link this back to our FS exam. Best practices in consistency and quality connect directly to several exam domains. Whether this is a surveying process and methods to ensure that computations and closures are checked, our boundary law and real property principles to ensure that clear communications of rights are applied, professional ethics and business practices, ensuring documents are truthful, consistent, and protective of the public. If you are a student who can learn these best practices here in our classroom and in our labs, you're already preparing for both future licensure exams and the burden of professional responsibility. Consistency and quality are not luxuries afforded to us as surveyors, afforded to us freely. They are the backbone of our professional practice. A firm that neglects them risks rejection, disputes, and losses of reputation. A firm that masters them is going to build trust with regulators, clients, and public. As drafters, your role in enforcing consistency and ensuring quality cannot be overstated. Every choice you make, which template you start from, and which line weight you assign, which note you include, is a step toward either clarity or confusion. By committing to best practices, you ensure that your plats are not only compliant with Texas law, but also respected as enduring records of property and rights. Today's lecture has taken us through one of the most weighty and consequential responsibility of a survey engineer, the preparation of plats. We began by asking a simple question: what is a plat? And we discovered that the answer is layered. A plat is a drawing, yes, but it's also a legal instrument, a public record, and a safeguard of property rights. From there, we examined the purpose of a plat: to provide legal certainty, to ensure compliance with statutory frameworks, and to guide the orderly development of land, to communicate boundaries to non-surveyors, and ultimately to protect the public interest. Then we moved into the Texas-specific requirements for plats, as we laid out the local government code, our board rules, and the TSPS manual of practice, all a framework that transforms principles into enforceable obligations. We also considered the types of plats recognized in Texas: subdivision plats, replats, amending plats, minor plats, vacating plats, and specialty plats, each reflecting a different legal context and client need. From there, we drilled into the drafter's role in plat preparation, recognizing how much responsibility rests on your shoulders, even though the RPLS carries ultimate authority to seal and certify. The heart of this lecture, though, was in the ethical and legal considerations. We looked at Texas case law, statutes, and board standards that make clear why surveyors must be truthful, diligent, and faithful to evidence. We saw how cases like Stafford v. King enshrine the principle of following the footsteps of the original surveyor, and how board rules codify obligations of clarity, competence, and public protection. Finally, we translated those standards into design principles, template features, and best practices. The everyday habits that ensure plats are consistent, legible, and reliable. There was one theme that tied the lecture together. It's the ideal that a plat sits at the intersection of law, land, and professional duty. The law gives plats their authority through statutes, ordinances, and board rules. The land provides the evidence through monuments, deeds, and natural features that the surveyor must interpret. And the professional duty ensures that what is drawn is truthful, clear, and protective of the public welfare. Plats are not optional drawings. They are compulsory records. Once recorded, they guide land ownership and are used for generations. That permanence gives the drafter's work unusual gravity. And throughout this lecture, I've emphasized the drafter's responsibility. You may not be the one sealing the plat, but your role in drafting, checking, and formatting and managing data is indispensable. It is your careful line work that ensures boundaries stand out. It is your management of templates and styles that ensures consistency. It is your discipline in notes and legends that ensures clarity. And it is your vigilance in version control and final management that ensures sealed records remain intact and unaltered. In short, without skilled drafters, surveyors cannot meet their ethical and legal obligations. And you should also recognize how much of today's lecture connected directly to the fundamentals of surveying exam. This exam, the first step towards becoming a licensed surveyor, or an SIT, the exam will test your knowledge of boundary law, subdivision design, professional ethics, survey computations, and map communication. Everything we discussed today, from curve tables to dedication statements, from the hierarchy of calls to platting statutes, is either explicitly or implicitly part of the FS body of knowledge. But more than that, this lecture will hopefully have prepared you for your professional life beyond the exam. Texas-specific statutes may not appear on the FS, but they will govern every plat you prepare as a drafter or surveyor in the state. Knowing them and applying them faithfully is what separates you as a technician from you as a professional. And as we close, carry away 3 central truths about plats. Plats are more than drawings. They're legal instruments that fix property rights and protect the public. Plats demand both science and professional judgment. From the mathematics of closure to the legal principles of boundary law, from the precision of drafting to the ethics of communication. And plats endure. Long after the survey crew has left the field, long after a subdivision has been built, the plat remains a public record, shaping land use and ownership for generations. Your responsibility as future drafters and surveyors is to prepare plats that will stand that test. Because when you put line to paper or line to CAD, you're not just making a map. You're creating a piece of law, a piece of history, and a piece of trust between society and the surveying profession. That is the essence of your duty, and that is why this lecture matters.